Hi everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm excited to share with you one of my family's absolute favorite dishes, tostones. Now, tostones are a twice fried, so definitely perfect for Hanukkah, dish made from plantain bananas. Plantains look like this. This is an underripe plantain, so it's green. So if you are following along with us today, hopefully you got green plantains, and if not, you can make them later and just watch along with us. But we want, in order to make a true tostones, we want some green plantain bananas. These are underripe and they are very starchy. We use them much like in American cuisine, we use potatoes. In Cuban cuisine, we use green plantains. We also use sweet plantains, which is just the ripe version. But in this dish, tostones, we are using the green plantain. So here is how you peel the green plantain. You cut the top off and the tail, and you score it along the spine and the belly. I'm not cutting all the way through, I'm just scoring it. And then using your thumb or a spoon, I'm just gonna peel the peel away from the flesh, and it should come off pretty easily. If it doesn't, you can go back in with your knife and just scrape off the bits that stuck to the meat of the plantain. Now, the reason we're not using ripened plantains in this dish is because this is a savory dish. It's not a sweet dish. It's not sweet plantains. So we want it to taste almost like a potato. And in this case, you'll see when we're done that it really does. So I'm peeling my plantain. I'm coming in, this part didn't come off as easily, so I'm coming in with my knife and just making sure that I have all of the peel off of the flesh. While we're waiting, hopefully you have heated up your oil. If you haven't, now's a good time to do that. I'm using vegetable oil. You can use any oil that tolerates a high heat. So canola oil, vegetable oil, peanut oil, those are all great options for this. I just happen to use vegetable oil because that's what I've always done. So this one is peeled. I'll peel one more just to show you. So again, we cut from the top and the tail, and I'm scoring the belly, and I'm scoring the spine, and I'm going in with my spoon and just loosening it from the flesh. And then I can peel it pretty much right off. That's what we want. And on the other side, once you sort of separate it with the spoon, you can go in there with your finger and get the rest of the peel, no problem. Sometimes like this, a little piece sticks to it. You can see how a little piece stuck to the top. I'm just going in with my knife. Okay, so I have all the bits of peel off my plantain, but I saved a tiny little piece because this is how I test the heat of my oil. And I'm gonna put it in, and if it bubbles, which it does, it's ready for the next step. So like I said before, this is a twice fried dish. So the first fry is really just to soften the plantain. So I'm cutting my plantains into about an inch and a half thick coins, and I'm going to very carefully put them in my oil here. This is the first of two fries, and it's really just to soften the plantain, because the next fry is the one that's going to give us that signature golden crunch. Now, in some cultures, there are many cultures and communities that make tostones. It's not just the Cubans, which is where my family is from.
You're on video? Your mic.
They, all along the Caribbean and much of Latin America, they make this dish. They call it different things sometimes. Sometimes they're called patacones. But in Cuba, they're called tostones. So, and in some cultures, they almost brine the raw plantain in a salted water or a lime water. But I'm a truist, I'm a simplist over here, traditionalist. And we just keep it simple and just the plain plátano, the plain plantain is what goes in this dish for me. So you saw, I did it again with this one. I cut the top and the bottom, I scored the belly, and I scored the spine. And I went in there with my spoon, and it came right off. Now, you'll see that there's a dark spot here. I'm just gonna cut it off because I don't want that in my tostone. And if you were to brine them, I would make sure that they are completely dry before you place them in the oil. Otherwise, you could have a very dangerous mess on your hand. So, okay. We're gonna fry for the first fry for about 2 minutes each side. I'm flipping it over. I'm flipping each of them over here. I'm just using tongs here. Some people use like a mesh spider, something like this. I just find that tongs are easier to maneuver. More, just, I mean, I can just grab them with the tongs and it works for me. So yeah. But use what you're comfortable with. What do you use to flip your latkes? Use that. Okay, so now each of these plantain inches is frying still on the first fry, but on the second side. And in about 2 minutes, they're gonna come out and I'm gonna press them. Now, I would say that most Cuban families who are well-versed in the kitchen have one of these. This is called a tostonera. It is a tostone press. And you put the first fried plantain in the well and you press it, kind of like you would press a tortilla, but it's a smaller version. If you don't have a tostonera, no worries, I got you. You can use a tortilla press, or you can use a mug or a bowl. I'm gonna show you how I use a bowl in a minute. Same effect. Don't tell my Cuban friends, but it's true. Okay, so I'm taking the first fry batch out very carefully. Again, when you're working with hot oil, you gotta be careful because that definitely burns. Okay, so we're taking these out. And I'll let those other ones keep going while I show you how to press these. Okay, so if you have a tostonera, like I said, you put the first fried plantain in the well and you press it down and it turns into a disc. That's what we want. Once the rest of these are pressed, they're gonna go back into the oil and all of those bits that you've pressed out that are soft right now are gonna crisp up so beautifully, so deliciously. So if you don't have a tostonera, I'm gonna show you what to do. I'm using this flat bottom bowl and I just push it down and it does the same thing, maybe even better, but please don't tell them I said that. Don't tell my Cuban friends. They'll think I'm not legitimate here. But truly, can you tell the difference between one pressed with my tostonera and one pressed with the bowl? Not really. My tostonera is a prized possession though. I feel like it was a rite of passage to get one. This is the only one I've ever owned. And if you read my piece for the Nosher, you'll know that my mom gave it to me when I got my very first apartment. And it was sort of a symbol that I had become an adult, that now I had my own tostonera. So, okay. Now, they will stick to this, and that's not an issue. You just use your tongs to sort of scrape it out.
We'll come back to it.
And I'm pulling out, again, more of the first fry. Again, the first fry is really just about softening them, initially cooking them, like par cooking them. And once they come out, we'll press them, just like we did with this first batch over here. Now, the first batch that I've already pressed, it's going back in the oil for the second fry. Again, these are twice fried dishes. Go big or go home on Hanukkah, friends. This is a fried holiday, all about the oil. So we're twice frying. And these are just gonna go right back in the oil to crisp up all those beautiful edges that you forced out when you mashed them. That's what becomes crisp and delicious. Now, depending on how your family made them growing up, or your personal preference, some people like them really, really thin and crisp, like a chip, like a potato chip. And some people like them thicker and meatier. I would just say maybe make a few of each, and you can please the crowd. And we, in my family, we serve these alongside a very traditional Cuban dipping sauce called mojo, which is just a garlic and citrus-based sauce that we use the way many Americans use ketchup. So it is our condiment of choice, and it is so good. But some of the other Caribbean and Latin American countries who make tostones or patacones, they use something called mayo ketchup, which is like a combination of ketchup and mayonnaise. And you can use a garlic aioli would be great with these. Really, anything that you might like with like a French fry or another fried item, like a latke, would probably be good on these. So give it a shot, give it a try with different dipping options. You can even set up like a dip bar for these. That would be fun. Okay, so these, the ones that we pressed initially are done, and I'm taking them out of the oil and putting them directly onto a paper towel lined sheet pan. You can also use a sheet pan with like a rack inside so that the oil drips down. I know that there's a lot of controversy with placing your fried foods on paper towels, but this is just how I've always done it. So that's how I do it. And immediately, right after they come out of the oil for their second fry, I just hit them with some kosher salt, and that's it. That's really all it is, all there is to it. And I gotta tell you, I don't know too many more Jewish things for Hanukkah than a fried gold coin. I think this might be the new gelt. So
well, your kid.
Who has questions? I'm here to help. I want to make your tostones a success. So let's hear what you've got.
Jenny, will your kids use your tostones as part of their dreidel game?
Ooh, you know, I hadn't thought about it, but now that you mention it, I think there's a good possibility.
I was also curious, do you involve them in the cooking process? I know that with frying things generally with latkes or, donuts, it's hard to get kids around with fried, oil splattering everywhere. Are they involved in the pressing of the plantains at all?
So cooking with kids is one of my personal specialties. I do a lot of cooking classes for families and specifically kids and adults with their kids, adults for their kids. And typically I don't like to fry when there are kids around. But there are steps in this recipe that kids absolutely can do. The thing is that you know your kids, you know their attention span, you know their ability, their skill level, you know whether or not they understand oil safety. And so if you're worried about having kids near the oil, just have them in another part of your kitchen, down the counter, at the kitchen table, somewhere else where they're away from the oil, because this part really can be dangerous for kids. But this part is definitely a kid pleaser, because when you smash it, you're seeing the banana guts come out. What's more fun than that for a kid? So if you don't have a tostonera, give them a bowl and watch them just smash it. Absolutely, that is definitely a step that a kid can do.
Great, thank you. We're getting lots of questions in the chat about the history of this dish. Can you either share your personal family history, or if you have any context for how this dish came to be?
So I cannot say specifically where it came to be, but I can tell you that Cuban cuisine, generally speaking, is kind of a mixture between Spanish cuisine, African cuisine, and indigenous cuisine, which is true about the people of Cuba. That's really, the Cuban heritage is a mixture of those three elements. And it's very much reflected in their food. And I know that in other Caribbean countries and in also many African countries, they do use the plantain a lot, both the sweet version and the savory version. And so I think that the origin may come from there. I don't know for certain, but that would be my guess. And in my family, it's as old as I can remember. You know, we have served this with every festive meal, not just for Hanukkah, but it certainly lends itself beautifully to Hanukkah since it is a fried dish. But really, we use this as a side dish to any festive meal. So, yeah.
Thank you. So it's not just for Hanukkah, it can be all year round.
It can be all year round, although I call this, to my children, I call this a sometimes food. We don't eat it every single day, of course, but definitely when there is cause for celebration, you can pretty much guarantee that there will be tostones on the table.
So does that mean that the plantains are available all year round, or are they more of a seasonal fruit?
So in Cuba, they're available all year round, and mostly because they have one season in Cuba, and it's the season of hot. So they grow all year round in Cuba. But you can find them, I get this question a lot, actually. You can find them nowadays at just your general grocery store, supermarket. Many of them will have an international fruit, tiny little section, and you can find plantains there. Now, they may not be the correct degree of ripeness for tostones, because what you really want for tostones is one that is this green. When it starts to yellow and when it starts to spot, that's when it becomes sweet, and tostones should not be sweet. If you're going to make sweet plantains, it's a completely other dish altogether called platanos, which are delicious in their own right, but they're not tostones.
We're getting lots of questions about the different sauces and toppings that you've mentioned. Do you have your own garlic sauce, the mojo sauce that you mentioned, or do you play around with that recipe? And do you mind repeating it just once more for the people who missed it?
Sure. So I do have a written version of my family's mojo sauce, which you can find, let's see, where you can find it on the Cuban Reuben. It's written with a roasted chicken, but you can you can either make the roasted chicken if you want, or just make the mojo sauce, and that works too. But I wrote that, I actually wrote it down when I wrote it for the Jewish Daily Forward years ago. But it's on my blog, and which is now more of a portfolio than a blog, but you can find it there. But if you don't want to look there, it's essentially garlic and onions, sour orange, which is integral to Cuban cuisine, and so hard to find. Sour orange is not just an orange that's underripe. It's an actual orange that grows sour. I want to say that it's related to a Meyer lemon, but it's not the same thing either. If you cannot find sour orange, or naranja agria as we call it, I use equal parts orange and lime to produce the same or a similar flavor. And so it's garlic, onion, naranja agria, sour orange, oregano, and oil. And that's basically
What could be bad?
What could be bad, right? So I just took my first fry out again, and I mashed it. Yeah, the more I'm thinking about it, that's definitely a kid-friendly job. Who's not gonna love to mash?
Right. So Judy, who's in the chat, mentioned that tostoneros are available on Amazon. Are there? So obviously that's not where your mother found it. Are there things to look out for when buying a tostonero, or it'll get the job done if they can find it?
The kitschier, the better. But no, they'll all get to the job done. Really, you just need something that's going to contain the edges, although maybe not. Like with the bowl, the edges aren't contained, and I actually really like that these rough edges get extra crisp. So, but they'll typically have a well here, and sometimes they're made of wood. This one happens to be made of plastic. But no, and it doesn't have to be a tostonera. It could be a tortilla press as well. So if you're not so into buying utensils that are only for one dish, get a tortilla press, and there you go. You can make 2 dishes.
That's actually so fitting. Richie mentioned, what else can you use it for? Do you find that you reach for it in other situations?
I absolutely do not, but we make tostones enough that to us it's worth having it, and also there's something sentimental about it. You know, like I said, my mom gave it to me when I got my first apartment, and it's symbolic to me that it was when she sort of recognized my adulthood. So I use it often, and I use it for tostones. But see, I mean, these are turning out perfectly fine. And if you are looking for something that has a well, look at this mug. You can see it has a border here that will contain, I'll show you, in the same way that the well in my tostonera did. See, it contained it perfectly. So if you want that more uniform coin look without the rigid edges, you can definitely use the bottom of a big mug. And now I'm going in with that second fry again.
Jenny, you're using quite a large frying pan. Does that affect the way your plantains come out?
So thank you for bringing that up. I meant to tell you this. When I am frying, whether it's latkes or tostones or schnitzel, whatever I'm frying, I like to use, and this is a personal preference, I like to use an electric skillet. This is an electric skillet. And And the reason I like to use an electric skillet is because no matter what I put in there, it will regulate the temperature. So crowding the pan is still a concern, but it's less of a concern about temperature and more about whether or not you're giving your food room to groove. So with an electric skillet, it will maintain the temperature that you want it to have. So I like to fry all the fried things in my electric skillet. This is just the size that mine came in. My mom's electric skillet is smaller and it works just fine. So obviously the amount of oil you use will be different depending on the size of your pan, but you really want like about an inch high of oil in your pan, because you don't want them touching the bottom, you want them to be floating. Well, you want the coins to be floating. The first fry, they may touch the bottom, which is another reason why you flip them, to make sure that both sides get fried nice and golden. But yeah, good question.
And we're getting lots of questions about frying in general. Do we need to go for the second fry? Is there any way we can mimic the same effect in the oven? What are your thoughts on?
I get this question an awful lot. Can you air fry a tostone? The short answer is yes, you can air fry a tostone. But the longer answer is that then it won't be a tostone. This is not a food that we eat every single day. So I think that it's okay to indulge in something fried once in a while. And you will definitely never get diet advice from me. But if you wanted to make this in an air fryer, you could. I know that there's a good tostone air fryer recipe. I think it's on Simply Recipes. I think that's where I saw it. Just don't come at me if it doesn't turn out exactly the same. I definitely recommend frying them, truly frying them. If what you're after is that crisp golden edge and golden coin, I don't think it can be replicated, but you can give it a try and let me know. I'm always one to admit if I'm wrong. So if you are successful at it, let me know, because I will want to hear about it.
And the second fry is not optional. It's part of it.
The second fry is not optional. In fact, I think that the second fry is really what makes a tostone a tostone. So, even the name tostone, the root of it is tostar, to crisp up. So if it's not crisp, if it's not crunchy, it's not a tostone.
Amazing. Can you share a little bit about how you can do any prep work ahead of time? I see there are some people who are really interested in maybe taking you up on doing a tostone bar with toppings.
Yeah.
How can they cut down on the time and still serve them fresh?
Absolutely. Okay. So tostones should always be served fresh. You can make them ahead of time, like the second fry, and just keep them warm in the oven in the same way you would a latke. But just like latkes, they're not going to be exactly the same as if you serve them right away. So what I recommend, if you are hoping to make a bunch of them all at once, and to serve a larger group, is you can do the first fry ahead of time, and you can do the mash ahead of time. And then right before you're going to serve, do the second fry so that they're nice and crisp and hot and ready to serve. So you will see also, it doesn't take a ton of plantains to make a lot. I made today with you, I think I made 3 plantains, and this is not a small portion that I've made. So it's not a ton of work. It's certainly a lot quicker than making latkes, because you're not peeling in the same way, you're not shredding, and squeezing liquid out, none of that. No mixing. You're simply peeling an unripe plantain, cutting up into chunks, and frying. And that's really it.
It seems that your oil is very clean compared to some other oils. You know, once you're done frying a few batches, the oil doesn't always have that clear finish. What there are some people who are asking, do you reuse the oil for something else? What's your trick here? Do you just keep frying plantains until the night's done?
Very good question. So Cuban cuisine generally, this is not true for every single dish, but generally speaking, Cuban cuisine is very much of the waste not, want not mentality. So we use everything and we use it in every way. So yes, I would absolutely reuse this oil, mostly because it's not like I'm frying fish in this oil. Plantains don't leave such a strong flavor residue in there. So I do have little bits here of like the edges that came off. So if I were to use this again, I would let it cool completely and I would strain it into, frankly, if I'm being totally honest, an old pickle jar and store it under my sink. And I would absolutely use it again. I'm probably going to use this oil to fry latkes or to fry more tostones. But yeah, you can use it to fry anything. You can fry something sweet in here too, because the salt was only added after the fry, after I took it out. So really, if you don't mind the flavor of green plantains, it's a pretty mild flavor, which is also why we dunk it in something. I think you're fine to reuse this oil.
Great, thank you. We can't see your stove, so is it on a medium temperature? What temperature do you try and keep your oil
So I
at?
just off actually. I had it on. It was somewhere between 350 and 375. And that's really, I would say 375 is like the ideal frying temperature to get those nice crisp edges. And again, using an electric skillet, you don't have to worry about checking the temperature with a thermometer rather. You don't have to worry about adjusting it depending on what's in there. It does all that work for you. So for me, this was a wedding gift that I use very much.
Wonderful. I don't know if anyone else is thinking this as well, but you just fried a whole lot of plantains and didn't taste any?
Oh,
would you like to taste your tostones?
Yes, I would. Do you want to hear the crunch? Let's see if I can show you the crunch.
I heard
Was
that.
There? These are so good. I don't have dipping sauce with me today, so something is definitely missing. But these are savory, they're crisp, they're crunchy, they're golden and delicious, and I know you're gonna love them.
Amazing. We're having a very active chat here, so I'm happy to forward their questions on their behalf. So when you're putting out a plate of tostones, do you garnish? Do you have it? Do you have them stacked on top of each other? Or you try and keep them flat? Do they make it to a serving plate, or does everyone grab them right when they're on the paper towel?
You've been to my family functions, haven't you? So, yes and no. The chefs in my family, which happen to be all the matriarchs, understand that if this is as many tostones as you plan to serve, you need to have made this many, because definitely there will be snackers around swiping them just as you're pulling them out of the oil. So I would plan, if you're going to make these, I would plan to make twice as many as you need. because they will be stolen. And I actually don't recommend stacking them because I find that the ones at the bottom, when they're stacked, lose their crunch a little bit. So if you're going to serve them on a platter, I would find a platter that, you can sort of spread them out a little. And I would stay away from garnish, actually, because I would want these just to sort of stand out on their own. And really, they need to be eaten just as, I almost prefer just having someone have your tostone topping bar right next to the frying section, because then they can just take it from the fryer, salt it, and dip and eat. And frankly, that's the best way to have tostones. But we eat them, someone will take maybe a serving is like this many, but not really. And that would be the side to whatever roast or whatever that you're making with some rice and beans.
Great. So we've seen that you have salted. Do you get fancy with your salts? Do you do kosher salt or table salt?
When I cook Cuban food, and this is a personal thing, this is not all Cuban chefs around the world. For me, Cuban food is like home cooking. It's not fancy. It's do a lot with a little type of thing. So I'm not gonna reach for like my flaky sea salt. You can, by all means. But for me, it just doesn't feel authentic. So I just go for what I use in my everyday cooking, which is just Morton's kosher salt. And I take a nice hefty pinch, which if you've ever seen the words a pinch of in a recipe, it means one thing. And it is a 3-finger pinch. So whatever you can pick up with 3 fingers, that's a pinch. So I just take a nice hefty pinch, and from way up high, I sprinkle it so that it gets a nice even coating. But I don't use a fancy, pink salt or whatever salt, because for me, it's not fancy food. It's home food. It's, that, yeah. So I use what I use all the time.
Thank you so much. And I learned that I would have said a pinch is 2 fingers. That's really helpful. Do you have any advice for first-time tostones makers? Yes, you're nodding your head.
Yeah, so you saw that it's not complex. This is not a complex recipe. It's a really simple, basic, straightforward recipe. And I think that a lot of times, particularly people who are not very seasoned in the kitchen, may hear the name tostone and think that it is, this is out of my comfort zone. I don't know how to make this. This can be scary. But really, you saw how easy it is. It's plantain, oil, and salt, just 3 ingredients. And it's really simple. So you can do it. You have my support. And if anyone has questions beyond this, just reach out to me. I'm really good about responding to comments. So, yeah.
Where can people reach out to you?
Yeah. Where can people reach out to me?
Yeah.
My website, jenniferstempel.com. And there's a contact form there.
Great. I'll put that in the chat. And we're getting lots of questions about your fryer. Do you have time for a few more, Jennifer?
Sure. In fact, because I'm that kind of person, I've had this fryer since 2008 when I got married, and I store it in the box. So this one, I don't even think they make it anymore, but it is a Presto 12-inch electric stainless steel skillet. I don't think they make it anymore because I think my mom tried to get one and she couldn't. But they, I'm sure, have a version of this. It doesn't have to be round. It can be square. It doesn't have to be, this one happens to have a lid. You don't need a lid for this recipe. But really, I like to do all of my frying in an electric skillet, and I told you why. I love that it controls the temperature really well.
Great. Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Commercial for Presto.
I think you'd be hired. We're getting lots of thumbs up and claps and thank yous in the chat. So if anyone has any last questions, they're free to hang on. But Jennifer, thank you so much.
Thank you guys, and thank you so much for joining tonight and for taking some time out of your night to be here. And if you do make these, my favorite part of my job is when people send me pictures. So please send me pictures and let me know how you did. And again, if you have any questions, you know where to find me, jenniferstempel.com. Shoot me a note and I will do my best to respond.